Welcome to Agree to Disagree, the podcast where two sisters show how you can disagree about everything but still keep that family bond and friendship.
That's right. We're Sharon and Karen, and we don't just see the world differently, we live it differently. Grab a coffee, settle in, and enjoy the conversation. Who knows, you might even find yourself changing sides.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining again this week. Now we're going to start right in with part 2 of Who Do You Trust?
Who's this woman?
Maria, her name is Maria Ressa, and she is a professor at Columbia University. She's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She's a journalist and an activist out of the Philippines. She was an activist against Duterte government in Philippines. She's been arrested and jailed many times, and they went after her for tax evasion just to shut her up. But she is so flippin' smart. And she said, if you become an ostrich and avoid the news, you lose the rights for your kids.
Are you calling me a freaking ostrich?
I'm just saying.
That's what you just
I'm
said.
just saying.
You just called me an ostrich.
That's what
Actually,
you took
my
out of that.
friend-
Out of that whole statement, that's the only piece of information you took.
Because I'm a conservative Republican, so I'm going to take that as an attack, and I'm going to get angry.
No, but I think that we all have that desire to put our head in the sand and just avoid, avoid, because it is too much sometimes. We
Well, that
all
doesn't
had.
mean that- well, I disagree with her statement on you lose the rights, or what did she say?
You lose the rights
You
for your
lose them.
kids. And
I
what
don't think
she
you lose the rights for
means-
your kids. If you don't vote, if you're not voting, it's for your kids.
No, what she's saying, it's not you personally. What she's saying is if enough people put their head in the sand, then all of this happens without you knowing about it. And that's where your rights get taken away. Because you have to understand, you said, I've been through this. I've seen exactly what is happening in the Philippines was happening here. And she said, you can tick the boxes to say, yep, this was the first thing they did. This was the second thing they did. This is the third thing they did. And her points were...
And I don't disagree with her about that, because I have a friend in the UK who says they're starting to see the same thing in the UK. Censorship and starting to, they're not trusting the media. You're starting to see it there as well.
Well, her comments about this administration and the things that they're doing are very reminiscent to her of what they went through in the Philippines with the government becoming an authoritarian government.
That's why you like her, because she hates Trump.
No,
Okay, now I get
she
it.
doesn't hate Trump. This was not an anti-Trump thing. This is what I experienced in the Philippines. This is what I'm seeing the government, not just Trump, these are the things that I saw in the Philippines, and I'm seeing these same things occurring at this moment. Facts. She's talking about facts, the things that are actually happening. You'd like her. She doesn't get personal.
I would like her then.
She said amazing things. She said journalism is the antidote to tyranny, because right now all the crappy stuff is what gets the clicks, and a fact-based universe is not as profitable, which is true.
Oh, true. Yeah.
She said
Absolutely
you
true.
can't tell fact from fiction, and when you have no facts, the only government that can survive is a dictatorship.
Okay, so let's go back to this, because you brought this up on one of the other podcasts. Like, who do we trust? Do we trust the media? Do we trust government? So here's some research that I found about the facts, right? They're breaking down the Dems and the Republicans' trust of different media and legislative branches and governments. Okay. So the news media is the least trusted group among 10 U.S. civic and political institutions involved in the democratic process. They're the least trusted right now. Overall, least trusted. The legislative branch of the federal government, consisting of the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, is rated about as poorly as the media with 34%.
Yeah.
Most people trust their local government more so than their state, but they trust their state government more than their federal government, which that to me makes sense. Like that totally resonated with me, because it's more about how does this impact me today, right now, that kind of stuff. And your local and your state have more impact on you directly than your federal, right? But Democrats trust most entities more than Republicans. We all know that. That would be ridiculous to say otherwise, except for the judicial branch. Did you read that far? Majority of Democrats, ranging from 54 to 82%, express a great deal or fair amount of trust in all but two entities, the legislative and judicial branches of the federal government. When was that
done? Done any time in the last 4 years? I would say, yeah, absolutely.
It's like 21.
Yeah, because what's happened in the Supreme Court in the last 5 to 6 years? Have you been following that news? Do you know what's been happening there?
Oh, a little bit, not really.
Well, it's coming out, all of the payoffs that they've been getting, all the kickbacks that they've been getting. So why would you trust
I haven't
them?
heard any of that. I haven't heard any of that. That's not what I
heard. One of them, Thomas, has gotten millions in trips and boats and school fees for his kids and grandkids, whatever. It's ridiculous how many millions of dollars he's gotten payment from people that have had cases or own companies that have had cases in front of the Supreme Court. So why would you trust that organization? That's why the Democrats don't trust it.
Wasn't he the one that was
his wife was
also had some sexual assault charges brought against
Clarence
him?
Thomas is the one who, before he got nominated. That's another podcast. No, the other thing that she said, though, and I thought this was really interesting, she said, our system has broken down trust. And when you don't have trust, civil engagement dies, which is exactly why we're doing this podcast, because civil engagement is dying.
Yeah.
And you only trust your friends, family, close circle bubble. You were talking about your sphere of influence last week.
Yes, I was.
She said, we need to get back to a fact-based reality. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. And without those three things, you can't have a shared reality. And without that, you can't have journalism, you can't have democracy, and you can't solve any problems.
So how does she think we're supposed to do that, though? If she's so smart, she should be solving the world's problems.
I forgot.
Not to be mean, Maria. Sorry.
I forgot what she said. I think it was just about the fact of don't put your head in the sand, and still the people have the power. And I'm sure that you heard before he got elected, the left, their messaging was, you're going to lose your democracy. It's going to be, hellfire is going to rain down pretty much. And it's all going to blow up in our faces. And I'm still not convinced that it's not going to, but
it's not.
It was.
Things are actually turning around.
Okay. You haven't seen the stock market lately, have you?
Prices coming down for the first time in 4 years.
Well, stock market's way down. No, but now I forgot what I was going to say. If you interrupt me, I am going to forget what I'm going to say.
Yay! That's my strategy going forward.
That's a good strategy because it will always work.
I think so too. Totally my new strategy.
What were we talking about?
I asked how Maria was going to solve this. How are we going to fact find and have truth in media?
Well, she actually she is the co-founder of a news site, and I think it's primarily in the Philippines.
So she's got a conflict of interest. Okay.
No. She was saying, I'm
just using your words.
She was saying
that sounds like a conflict of interest.
She wasn't promoting her site. I'm just saying she just said that basically the journalists need to get back to what they used to do, which was report the news and not give their commentary.
But it goes back to what you were saying about ratings. That's what drives their salaries. That's what drives their popularity. That's what drives everything. It's money. Money is the root of all problems.
I know. And we do need to have another podcast about this, because you said there's no way to get money out of politics, and there are ways to get money out of politics.
I definitely agree that campaign fundraising should be completely removed and overhauled, and that's just ridiculous. But we're not going to go down that road right now. We'll talk about that later.
But you'll be interested to hear also, I listened to a podcast this morning that had Chris Christie on it. Jon Stewart and Chris Christie were talking, and he actually gave me a little bit of hope. You know who Chris Christie is?
Uh-huh.
And he said, actually, it's, again, going back kind of to the people with the power.
Yeah.
And he said it's going to be up to the governors, because, he supported Trump for a while.
He did.
And he said he backed out as soon as he said the election was stolen. He said that was the line in the sand for me. That was a step too far.
Yeah.
But the governors, and he said the legislatures, if they can find their backbones and stand up for what's really right, he said, but it's actually going to be up to the governors and the local, like you were saying, the local governments, because that's who the people trust and that's who they can communicate to.
So to your point and to Maria's point, power to the people, right? What's interesting, though, is if it really is power of the people, Republicans, though, are much more likely to favor protecting press freedom over curbing misinformation. Just let it go. Let the press stop having, this kind of talks to big government versus small government, right?
Well, now say that again. You said that they favor freedom of the press over misinformation. So they don't care.
over curbing misinformation. So they don't
over curbing misinformation.
Don't censor.
So they would rather have freedom, total freedom, be able to say whatever you want, regardless of whether it's true or not.
Let me tell you why, though. Because I thought about this. I'm like, okay, this is interesting that I'm reading this and I'm seeing this stat and that Republicans are more likely to favor protecting freedom of the press over curbing misinformation, because most Republicans are all about the Constitution. And so that is a constitutional right, is freedom of speech, which then bleeds into freedom of the press. We should have the right to say whatever we want to say, regardless of who it pisses off, or, we should not be censored. That's where the Republican side of things come from, is it goes back to the Constitution.
But if you don't hold your media to account to represent things in a factual manner, again, this goes to, if you cannot trust your media to give you factual information, if you just tell them you're
So would
free,
you say that this is kind of screwed up thinking then? Let's talk about this.
I think it's,
on one hand,
I think that there's a difference.
The
I think there's a difference between freedom of speech and freedom of the press. I think freedom of the press should be, yes, you are free to report on anything, but that reporting should be factual. It should be fact-based, unless it's an opinion piece.
Agreed. However, it's interesting that Republicans have the least amount of trust in the media, but say don't censor them.
Well,
right.
See, my left-leaning brain says that's because they want to be able to spread false information.
So to me, that does speak to a contradiction. So when I was reading that research and I'm like, I understood it. Like I understood, okay, why would we not want to curb misinformation if we have so much mistrust in the information that's coming out? Why would we not want to curb some of that? To me, there is a contradiction in that, because I don't feel like then we're really thinking about what we're saying and some of the ways that we view some of our values and views are contradicting with what we're doing, our behaviors.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to say.
And I think, again, it's
some of our values and views are contradicting our behaviors.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. I would say yes.
Okay, I just want to point out that I am saying something negative about the Republican conservative part, okay?
You said, let me remind me what you said. Your actions, your views are not...
Our
values
and philosophies are not being reflected in all of our behaviors.
100%.
You 100% agree that I am saying that about the Republican Party.
Yeah, because I think that, that statistic goes to the fact that I think that people are confusing freedom of speech with freedom of the press, because
I think you're right. So when I was reading that, like, and
freedom of the speech
also,
is
I want to note. Yeah, I just want to note. I brought this up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
to point out the dichotomy, I do think that's the right word, and contradiction in the Republican and conservative viewpoints of things. But it is interesting because when I read that stat, I was like, okay. So I understand where this is coming from, but it seems to contradict.
I'm glad that you explained it to me, because I would not have been able to figure out how they thought those two things at the same time.
I think it goes back to the Constitution of freedom of speech. I really think so. To me, but I think
and that makes sense that they would think that. But again, it's not the same thing.
Right. But I think in our mind, we're applying it to both. Right, we're applying freedom of speech
to freedom of the press
as well as to ourselves.
Yeah, and that's different. Like you can go and say a lie all you want, but the press is supposed to be purveyors of truth. and facts and
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes way back. I mean, I think that there has been a steady decline, and it made sense. Initially, back in the 70s, you had a handful of news organizations, and they were independent, and now they're owned by a handful of corporations own all the media and all the information. Yeah. And it's scary at the control that they have. One thing that Maria did say that was kind of frightening, because she said the Americans think that they vote with free will, and what they don't understand is they have been manipulated for a very long time, because the information that is sent out on social media, because they use the powers that be, the whatever you want to call them, they have the ability to manipulate the way that you think by using
100%. It's called algorithms. It's math,
but it doesn't just influence. It doesn't just influence what you buy.
And I don't think it's just.
But the thing is, she said, you don't have freedom of choice and even your vote anymore, because you've already been manipulated.
Unless you do research and you really dive in.
I think even with that,
you don't believe. Well, how? So hang on though. So if you don't believe half of what you're being told, how are you being manipulated? If you don't believe this, the stuff. How are you being manipulated if you don't believe over half of what's being said to you? Like, how are you being manipulated then?
Because because it goes back to what you talked about, your sphere of influence.
The sphere of
You're only believing what your friends and neighbors and family and your circle and bubble are telling you. You're more likely to believe them. But if you don't know if they're going and checking their information.
Yeah, but remember I said earlier, when I'm told something that sounds
fishy,
do. I go, and then I go back and I communicate that back. I'm like, that's not actually true. Yeah. This is what the actual facts are.
But if that has been broadcast on social media, then how many people are actually going in and fact-checking that?
Right.
So, I mean, how you fix...
I do believe that social media should not be where people get their news from.
Well, the reason that I say I get mine from social media is because I have the AP and Reuters as feeds on my site. So
and that's okay.
I don't have CNN, I don't have Fox News, but I do have trusted sources that I can at least get headlines, and then I can go and dive deep. Now, the social media news that I don't trust, and especially now, you have your certain Facebook groups that you follow, and we all do, and either right-leaning or left-leaning. So I have my left-leaning ones that I follow, and they will put up a headline.
I actually don't follow any.
Really? Well, you really avoid the news. But I get headlines, and I'm outraged when I read that headline. And now, for a while now, I go and I take that headline and I deep dive into it. I look it up. And 9 times out of 10, I'm like, they have misrepresented what this is.
Absolutely. I do the same thing. So when something does pop up. In social media, and I'm like, either get angered by it, or I'm like, you've got to be kidding me kind of thing. I will go and start researching it. And then I'm like, okay, that was a sensationalistic headline.
Yes.
Just meant to. And that's why 15, 20 years ago, I stopped watching the news, because they were so sensationalistic too.
I know.
And it just drives me crazy. It just drove me crazy. I'm like, that's not what y'all should be about. But they are, because of ratings and money.
And what the really sad thing is, I don't know about local news stations, but I know that newspapers are disappearing. I mean, they're almost completely gone.
Oh, I know. It's so sad.
So I don't know how local news.
I mean, I don't miss the black ink all over my hands, but I do feel like that is to me, that's a sad state of affairs in our world, where progress has taken something away from people who, like the elderly, who don't maybe use their phones and read online and stuff. And they want that piece of paper. That's what they trust.
Well, it's not even that. It's also that the journalism that went along with it is gone.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So it's going to be interesting to see in the next 10 years how the media addresses these issues. I don't know what the answer is. Do you know what the answer is? I don't know what the answer is.
I don't, and I don't think Maria does either, but hopefully she'll figure it out if she's so smart. However, I don't really hear a lot. You're wondering how the media is going to address these issues, and I'm like, when and where and in what world are they going to turn and look in a mirror and say they're the problem? They're not.
No, the only way that they'll turn and look in the mirror and make changes is if people start tuning out.
That's true.
Because it'll
hurt their pocketbooks.
Exactly. It's all the whole world is money driven. So once it starts hurting their pocketbooks, or if some philanthropist comes along and actually invent some actual fact-based news that people actually watch, because there are facts-based news independents out there that are giving factual information, but it's not sensationalist, so people don't watch. People would rather watch, the Kardashian news than what's actually happening in the world.
That's such a sad state of affairs.
It is sad. It is sad.
I mean, it really is.
So I don't think that we came to any conclusion on this except for, media bleeping.
It does. And you're going to have to bleep that out because that can be considered a cuss word.
I figured out how to do that in editing, so I can bleep that now.
Yeah. I don't think we came to any conclusions. I think you're right. Like, the media is problematic, regardless of which side of the fence you're on. It is problematic.
Yeah.
Social media is one of the reasons it is problematic. Leaders in our country is another reason it is problematic. Our political parties.
Right.
But we did agree AP and Reuters are good sources of the most objective media coverage.
Right.
So we'll definitely want to put them into our hashtag. And I think we agreed on why there was such a decline in 2016.
Did we?
Why
was there such a decline in 2016? Oh, in 2016?
I agreed. Yeah, we agreed on that.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get there, but you finally convinced me. And it would be interesting for us to research a little bit about why there was such a dip and decline in 1996. That would be interesting.
I didn't see that specifically, but
that was in the Gallup.
That was when
Clinton came to office,
then it's probably going to be around the circus that was the Lewinsky affairs, wouldn't you think?
But that was after he became president. That was while he was in office. This was when he was elected. He was elected in 96. That was an election year. So it'd be interesting to see what was going on in those campaigns. And then also I made the emphatic statement and owned up to the incongruence between the Republicans' values and our behaviors.
That's a whole nother podcast. We can deep dive into that.
But we also, talked about how we are much better in the Republican Party about getting the messaging out.
Oh, messaging? 100%. 1,000 times better. And they have been for decades. Party. For decades.
Yeah.
Messaging? Yeah. Spot on.
Yeah.
Okay. So until next week.
It's probably because we're so money driven. So it's all about ratings and money for us. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
I don't know. Maybe. I have no idea, but I wish that we had some of that secret sauce. I mean, we just did not seem to get our SSSS together. Sorry. I said it again.
Oh, that time you really did use the cuss word.
Yeah.
All
right. So next week,
okay,
same time, same channel.
Yeah.
And we thank everyone for listening.
Talk about? Thank you for listening to our
rant,
our opinions, our rants and raves and our opinions. Our commentary and talking heads.
Exactly. Okay. So we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
That wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review. It helps us improve and get the word out.
Reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram or shoot us an email at agreedtodisagree@gmail.com.
Let us know what you think, what topics you'd like us to cover, or any questions you might have. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.